Good morning, everybody. It's Dr. Antonio again for our live discussion on Monday morning. And hope you're doing well and having a great day so far. Hope you had a great weekend. And I wanted to have a brief discussion with you guys about sleep. And in Ayurveda, it's called Nidra. And Nidra, we've seen in some yoga studios as Yoga Nidra, which is relative in some ways to the idea of sleep. Yogic sleep, Yoga Nidra is yogic sleep, which is a different level of how to repose the body and do a really detailed instructional guide on sort of relaxing the body along the way. But this is not what we're talking about today. The Nidra or sleep that I'm wanting to share with you guys is the importance of sleep in Ayurveda. It's very important. It's one of the major key components to supporting health and well-being. And without it, we know that there's significant harm that can happen to the nervous system, which would affect all the other systems of the body. And so, therefore, proper sleep is important as important as sleep, but more so. It's not just enough to consider like, oh, I'm just going to sleep whenever, because that's still not proper. There's an understanding in Ayurveda that we are aligning ourselves with the daily rhythms of nature, the sunrise and sunset, dawn, dusk, just the natural cycles. And it's important to consider that. And we know scientifically, there have been many studies to show that when individuals take time out of their busy lifestyles and go away to some hiking or some camping experience, that their body starts to reset, that the chemistry generally starts to return back to a regulated state, and people get deeper rest, people feel calmer, people's appetites are improved, their clarity, memory, intelligence increases because you're in a relaxed state. So, similarly, when we are getting proper rest, we are encouraging that aspect of our physiology that influences our psychology and emotionality, and we can regulate ourselves in a way that day to day we can function more optimally. So, understanding that proper rest is essential for each person, and that we know what that can look like when we wake up the next morning and when we feel a sense of refreshment, when we feel a sense of lightness, when we feel a sense of inspiration, when we feel a sense of clarity, when we feel a sense of groundedness and calmness, and yet an eagerness to indulge in the day. And so, proper sleep in general can slightly vary with each person in the sense that some people might need 6 hours sleep, some people might need 7 hours sleep, some people might need 8 hours sleep. And obviously, I'm stating this as a general consideration. There are other considerations, babies, children, senior citizens, things like that, that would factor in as far as understanding what the proper sleep is for those individuals and how do we know that it's proper. So in Ayurveda, what's really amazing is that we have definitions of many different categories that support the components of health, which create an integrated, holistic approach, and we understand what it looks like through lists of symptoms or signs called lakshanas that indicate proper and improper sleep, proper and improper dieting, proper and improper exercising, proper and improper, studying, and proper and improper, so many different things that have been qualified and listed. And so we can look at these signs and indicate, oh, I must be doing it pretty well because I'm feeling this, this, and this, or I must not be doing it too well and I'm feeling this, this, and this. So in Ayurveda, understanding that it's better to go to sleep earlier than it is to stay up later and then sleep in. There's a term in Ayurveda called Ratri Jagarana, which is staying up late, which has a tendency, according to Ayurvedic medicine, to increase inflammation, increase dryness, increase neurological deficit, which in Ayurveda would be related to Vata Vriddhi, which is an increase of Vata, which is the increase of the air and space elements. So staying up late can cause vitiation in this, which will spiral into the next day. And so sometimes we can see that, for example, when we stay up late and the next day we're sleeping in and it's harder to start up in the morning, and appetite might be disrupted because we missed, breakfast time, and then we quickly somehow throughout the day find our way having caffeinated products or sweet products or things that are going to be stimulating. And so we start this domino effect of this downward spiral of, well, I'm staying up late, I'm sleeping in late, and now I'm going to need these external supplemental substances to compensate for what I didn't get because I didn't sleep properly. Staying up late discourages proper metabolism. So there's a tendency towards, malformation or um, uh, not processing the fat contents of things get processed into the fat cells. And so we have to consider, well, what does it mean to go to sleep early? Well, Ayurveda suggests that when you start to feel tired, first ask yourself, when do I start to notice feeling tired? And you might say, well, it's 8 o'clock, but I don't want to go to bed that early because it's too early. But if your body is saying it's time to wind down and the mind says, no, I have things to do, automatically we're creating a disconnect. We're creating this conflict. We're creating this sense of internalized friction, which over a long period of time can accumulate into other kinds of like pathologies, which is, in Ayurveda, when people are presenting with certain signs, symptoms, diagnoses, pathologies, it's because it slowly started to brew and we neglected to pay attention to the small, subtle signs that built up to that. We don't just over a sudden end up in a disease. More often than not, anyways, more often than not, we're slowly accumulating enough of the causative factors, which would be called nidana in Ayurveda, that are accumulating without us having a full awareness of it. But when you start developing an awareness of your body and your mind and your overall sense of, you know, vitality and energy, then you start paying attention yourself to what's the cause and effect. And I've talked about this before, karya karana, which is cause and effect. If I'm staying up late and sleeping in late and noticing that I'm having increased inflammation, increased anxiety, or I'm feeling extra sluggish, I'm feeling extra tired, or I need extra boosting elements throughout the day to support me, then that's an indication. Automatically, the body's going to be the guide to stating that there's something out of balance and that we need to re-regulate ourselves because the body doesn't lie. It doesn't make up things usually. The mind can, and the mind can impose itself on the body and produce certain symptoms. So we already know the psychosomatic correlations here. But, we're using the body as the guide. And so sleep is important. So getting the right amount of time, right amount of sleep, which would be 6, 7, 8 hours, not too far after when you start to feel tired at the end of the day is a good way to start mobilizing yourself in a way that you're aligning yourself with the day and what's necessary. Some days more than others because you might be more active some days and some days you might be less active. And what's been noticed, what I've noticed during the pandemic is a lot of people talking about sleep issues. A lot of my patients come in and they're like, "Oh my God, I can't sleep." And so one of the things that I've had them do as a regimen to support this process is a lot of people lost their regular day-to-day, you know, uh, routines as far as like waking up, getting ready to do this, that, and the other thing, go to work, have a long day at work, come home, make dinner. And so they're lacking that bigger part, the people that aren't automatically working at home naturally or because of this pandemic. And so I've said, create a level of structure throughout your day as if you were working. Keep the schedule routined so that you can have some sense of productivity and progress, and then fill in the gap where you're not doing the work externally with other activities, going for a hike, going for a walk, making phone calls, doing chores around your home or your apartment, or trying to keep some level of activity, not just sit there because it also takes energy to fall asleep, believe it or not. We have to utilize certain hormones and chemicals in the body that create this naturally peak and winding down, releasing, going into rest time. It's understood in Western medicine that melatonin starts to release in the bloodstream around the afternoon, 2 o'clock, and then it starts to peak at 10 o'clock. So this aligns with the Ayurvedic calendar or Ayurvedic schedule, where around 10 o'clock you should technically be asleep, according to Ayurveda. And the later you start to stay up, the more you start to increase these tendencies towards inflammation and dryness and issues with the digestive system. Metabolism is not going to be proper. The endocrine system is going to be offset. So imagine over a long term how this can accrue to other pathologies. So, getting the right amount of exercise throughout the day is important. Making sure the diet is also very important. Making sure what input output, how much are you putting in as far as what you're consuming, and what is your output as far as like what your energy is requiring, being required of you from activities. Are you indulging in a lot of stimulants throughout the day where you're drinking lots of coffee? Of course, this is going to have a negative effect on falling asleep. So removing the factors that contribute to why you wouldn't naturally fall asleep is the first step. And then also re-regulating yourself. So if you're that kind of person that's used to staying up till 1, 2, 3 in the morning, slowly wean back, a half hour, 15 minutes, whatever is the easiest way for you to do it to eventually bring yourself closer towards at least 11 o'clock, 10:30, 10 o'clock. Be in bed and falling asleep. Being in bed and falling asleep are two different things. You could be in bed at 8 and you're on your phone until like 10 o'clock. And then that kind of defeats the purpose because now you're being stimulated by the electronic devices, which do have a stimulating effect. What was interesting is that a few weeks ago I was teaching a yoga class, and one of my students was wearing these interesting goggles, or not goggles, they were blue tinted glasses. And I said, "What is that about?" And he said, "Oh, these glasses are designed to reduce um, the light from electronic devices, so that first thing in the morning you can go onto the electronic devices, and last thing before bed you can go onto the electronic devices." And I'm like, wow, it's interesting that they created glasses to force you against the natural cycle of like when you wake up and you feel a sense of connectedness to the day versus jump into your phone, jump onto your TV and watch the news, which is highly toxic, and I'll say toxic in a sense that it's just not proper for the senses to experience first thing in the morning. Loud music, blasting music, like these are all things that overrun the senses and already start this intention for the day of being sort of offset. And it has a subtle psychological, neurological effect. So, and the same thing at nighttime, listening to all these things that are stimulating before bed. How can you actually get proper rest if you're stimulated before bed? So, winding down any of those activities to really support higher quality of sleep. So, I'm going to kind of end there. And I know this is a short discussion. This is food for thought. I can continue this conversation next week. If you have any questions or if you'd like to work with me, I have my practice here in West Mount Airy. Actually, not West Mount Airy, sorry. In East Mount Airy. And I can be reached through Facebook messaging. Um, my website is www.stillpointayurveda.com, and I'm always open to working with new patients. And I look forward to being of service. And I hope you guys have a great day and a restful night's sleep. And I will talk to you guys soon. Have a great night today, tonight.